I would regard South Asian unity as a kind of civilisational concept or a historical concept, in the sense that if we limit our minds to present boundaries, then what you're talking about becomes even more unreal. But if you accept that there have been contacts over the last 5,000 years between, for example, Iran and Pakistan, India, between Central Asia and the subcontinent, between Sri Lanka and southern India, between Myanmar and many parts of eastern and southern India, then I think we are giving scope for this to be expanded. And so I would like to leave the borders of this union very, very uncertain, and on a voluntary basis for, say, Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan to come in or not come in as they desire. So it's not only a question of India-Pakistan, which of course will be the core issue, but also how it's conceived and whether, for instance, Pakistan will accept that they belong to the same civilization as India. After all, if they had, there wouldn't have been Pakistan perhaps. I find in my conversations in Pakistan that there is a kind of wistful desire for the cabinet mission proposals without recognizing that the cabinet mission proposals were like an IED, an improvised explosive device planted inside the Constitution. No, there was only one choice, either to remain as part of one country or to separate. And any other intermediate idea was simply unacceptable. I know that Ayesha Jalal has argued that Mr. Jinnah did not want Pakistan, but he wanted to be at the gullet of India. And for us to accept that we will have a knife at our throats for the first 10 years of independence was unacceptable. And so Gandhi said, it's a diseased limb, let it be amputated. Pakistan inside the Union of India would have been a diseased limb. And Pakistan outside of India is an enemy nation. So the only way of getting over this historical fault line is to have a dialogue. And the minute we have a dialogue, there is an incentive, in fact, for all other countries of the region to have a dialogue with India and for India to talk to them, because there is no similar problem between Pakistan and Nepal, Pakistan and Bhutan, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, or even Pakistan and Bangladesh. It's India that is the problem and India that is the solution. We do have a basis in SAARC that it was possible to create a community for regional cooperation, which initially began with seven countries and then extended to Afghanistan. And if we can get SAARC working, then I think there are immense possibilities. But unfortunately, SAARC is more or less dead in the water at the moment, not because of any inherent defect in the concept, but because of domestic quarrels between India and Pakistan. So we first have to fix India-Pakistan. And once we fix India-Pakistan, the rest of it will just fall into place. So it is possible to have regional cooperation going along with the India-Pakistan dialogue. In fact, I would say it's not possible for you to have regional cooperation. You can have sub-regional cooperation, but not regional cooperation in what is geographically described as South Asia without a simultaneous India-Pakistan dialogue that has to be uninterrupted and uninterruptible for South Asian regional cooperation to also proceed in an uninterrupted and uninterruptible manner. I mean, without India, a South Asian regional cooperation idea is quite nonsensical. And with India, it makes it impossible unless and until the India-Pakistan position is resolved. And that is why, in my view, the highest priority in Indian foreign policy should be to settle matters with Pakistan. And they can only be settled by dialogue. From 1985 until we came to the present government of India, there was simultaneously SAARC functioning as a regional cooperation body, not very effective, but at least in existence. And there was an India-Pakistan dialogue. In 1996, we determined what were the elements of that dialogue. Not 96, I think it was 97. In Murray, there was a discussion on what came to be called the composite dialogue. All the elements that need to be discussed have been discussed. What is more, the question of terrorism was resolved when Pervez Musharraf said in Islamabad in January 2004 that he would not allow Pakistan to be used as a base for non-state actors to indulge in acts of cross-border terrorism. And that enabled a very fruitful dialogue between India and Pakistan, which would have been brought, I think, to a definitive conclusion if President Musharraf hadn't got into a domestic quarrel with his own Chief Justice. That is what wrecked it. There was nothing else that wrecked it. And yet it is 13 years ago now. And in these 13 years, we've only gone backward, we haven't gone forward. And of course, it requires a lot of negotiation. Because apart from the principal India-Pakistan dialogue, that's different to the internal dialogue. Now, between Gilgit, Baltistan and Islamabad, there is a dialogue required. Between Muzaffarabad and Islamabad, there is a dialogue required. For us, we have to have a separate dialogue between Jammu and Delhi. We also have to have a separate dialogue between different parts of Jammu and Srinagar, as also with New Delhi. And if I may go back to the old J&K, which I think should be restored, we have a dialogue to go take place between Ladakh and Jammu, Ladakh and Kashmir as a valley. And so all these things have to be done at different levels. For all the other dialogues, the sub-dialogues I have mentioned are not between sovereign nations. And therefore they cannot be part of the India-Pakistan dialogue. South Asia is a set of sub-regions. There's very little between even Pakistan and Bangladesh, notwithstanding there having been a common country for 25 years. So therefore, it's a network of dialogues that is required. And if that network is at least encouraged, if not put in place, we will then be able to coordinate with the regional cooperation dialogue. So you start sitting up and saying, is South Asia a region or a conglomerate of regions? And it is in fact a conglomerate of regions, with virtually the only common point being a political entity called the Union of India. The Union of India has borders with all these countries of the South Asian region, and none of the other South Asian countries, except Afghanistan and Pakistan, has any kind of a border with each other. So therefore, India will necessarily be a dominant partner. And Pakistan resents that, understandably so. In fact, many of the smaller countries might say that, no, we came in for South Asian regional cooperation. Why is the India relationship so dominant? Well, unfortunately, unless we break up, that's going to be the case. This question of India-Pakistan relations is the fundamental one. There is no reason why the South Asian Regional Cooperation Initiative should not go forward, except that it can go forward only if there is an India-Pakistan dialogue, and within SAARC, we have to recognize the geo-economic reality that there are sub-regions that constitute the South Asian region, and therefore encouragement should be given to initiatives like BIMSTEC, which are sub-regional. And I would imagine that Pakistan and Afghanistan would wish to have various cooperation mechanisms set up which involve Central Asian countries. Instead of looking back into the fault lines of history, if we can look forward and say that we'll conduct this dialogue with a sensitivity towards the religious and historical elements of the past, then I think we can find a solution. Because practical solutions to this are easy. They're so easy. After all, 98% or so of Pakistan's trade till 1949 was with India. What would be no more normal than to restore it? If we could do it in 4 years, in Manmohan's time, well, it'll take us 4 days to do it now. Because the basis on which they did it is the right one. So one assumes a certain amount of goodwill and a desire for peace and harmony as underlying the exercise of an India-Pakistan dialogue. And I'm afraid intellectuals on both sides, civil servants on both sides, politicians on both sides, journalists on both sides, have a vested interest in keeping their specialization, which is being anti-Pakistan or anti-India, alive. They would be out of a job if we were to get together. Why is it that there is a visa problem? It's because there is a demand for visas on either side of the border. A much larger demand in Pakistan than there is in India, but still a demand. And the authorities decide that if the Pakistanis desire to have, authorities in India decide that if the Pakistanis desire to have a visa to come to India, that is the point at which we should attack them. That the jugular is the demand for visas. And reciprocally on the other side. So therefore, so long as a distinction is not made by governments between people-to-people contacts and government-to-government contacts, this issue of visas will be used as an instrument of state policy. As far as people are concerned, there's no problem. It's as far as governments are concerned that it's a principal problem, because both governments, and now recently my government in particular, uses Pakistanis as a substitute for attacking Indian Muslims. That is the tragedy. Muslims are a part and parcel of the demography of India, of the subcontinent, and through Southeast Asia. There is so much anger that is now spilling into the streets, and the violence against the Muslims, perpetrated sometimes by the Muslims, has spread into other avenues of our public life. And Gandhi's warning that if you depart from the path of non-violence on one path, violence is going to invade your national life through other avenues. And the protests we are seeing to this Agnipeeth proposal are proof of that. There is a much stronger reason to believe that India and Pakistan can talk. And what is more, the Sati Lamba Tariq Aziz discussions showed that it takes only a few years to even find a way of settlement of Kashmir. And so I believe that Kashmir is not an impossible problem to solve. It is very easy to resolve it if you decide to resolve it. So we are trading with each other, we are seeing each other's movies, we are really in many ways neighbors, But as Kuldeep Nair put it all those decades ago, we are very distant neighbors. And because we have, however much Pakistan may deny it, a common cultural and linguistic background, when Indians and Pakistanis start talking, they arrive at conclusions much quicker than, say, India and the United States of America. It's because we immediately understand each other. I'm at 80, I'm at 81. I have lost the hope that I had that in my lifetime I would see India-Pakistan relations moving to normality. I've lost that hope. And I think forces, particularly in India, forces in Pakistan have always been there. But forces, particularly in India, which are viciously anti-Pakistan and anti-Islam, are growing, and therefore the atmosphere is getting vitiated. It's much worse today than it was in 2014.
Much.
But it's better that we look reality in the face, because if we do, then maybe we'll get some answers. But if we, in a dreamy manner, think of goodwill where none exists, then we won't get it. We have to see what is the issue and coolly, calmly decide that we need to have goodwill in order to ensure our future.